All right, let's give you this related discussion now. U.S. tariffs are expected to deliver a severe shock to export sectors, risking tens of thousands of jobs, particularly as you've seen in the agricultural sector as well as in automotive production. However, township economies that are already seen as largely resilient and entrepreneurial stand to gain if they can shift efforts towards local producing, service delivery and regional markets. Let's unpack the challenges and opportunities faced by the township economy given this context. Bring in now Bheki Twala, who's the founder of Township Economic Commission of South Africa and joins us via our telephone line. Bheki Twala, thanks for making time to speak to us. Welcome to the SABC News channel. Many of the workers who are going to be affected by the US tariffs typically live and work some instances in townships, and that's why we were hoping to speak to you about what you reckon the response at that level could be. Let me just start by taking stock of what you reckon the impact is likely to be for people working in the sector.
No, thank you very much, Ayanda. Good morning and good morning to the viewers at home. Thank you for having us. Ayanda, this is an elephant in the room. The 30% tariffs, it's too high for the country, and obviously it would affect a lot of industries. And as you said, the people that are working in those industries are based in the township. Now, obviously it will have a serious impact in terms of the economy and in terms of, jobs. Most of the firms will be closed and then people will be losing their jobs. But now, as the Township Economic Commission has said, we're encouraging, the issue of the entrepreneurship. And let's go back to basics. Let's make sure that we sort of like, get as many aspired entrepreneurs on board, so that at the end of the day, people are starting to look at their own, markets. Most especially, you're talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We're talking about the township-to-township trade. This is why we're saying now, let's look at the other markets rather than only just the US.
Yeah, I wonder if we can just hone in on one of the points you've just made about township-to-township trade. We don't hear that term often. Break it down for us and help us understand what kind of form it can take, at least as you envision it.
Yeah, you remember, when we talk about trade, the charity begins at home. There, for example, that you look at the interview that you were just talking about now, the citrus farms in Limpopo and the people that are producing macadamia. So they look, those are the products that we need to make sure that at the end of the day, you get a township in Mpumalanga, as I'm in Mpumalanga now, talking to entrepreneurs, launching the tech in Mpumalanga, to trade with a township in KZN. Maybe let's take Wamashu, it's also trading with the Kailisha. Let's look at, because also the other thing that we're saying, Ayanda, we can't talk township economy if we don't produce what we consume. The issue of industrialization of the townships are very critical and very important to say, look, let's look at what we can then do, what sectors and industries that can be stimulated by creating those industries within the township, so that townships are able to trade among themselves. From there, when they then have an experience of trading from township to township, they can trade, in the African Continental Free Trade Area. They take that opportunity, but also look at other markets like Europe. We are hosting the G20. All the 19 countries, including Europe and Africa, will be in South Africa. What opportunities that we can then stimulate from the G20, make sure that at the end of the day, this tariff doesn't affect us dearly.
Yeah. We've spoken for years about trying to boost entrepreneurship in the country, and now it feels like South Africa is in a bit of a corner and has has very little options left outside of really taking this seriously. When government was announcing their interventions earlier this week, they spoke about an export support desk, and this is to help companies that are exporting to the US to try and find alternatives. But I wonder, to what extent you reckon this is also an opportunity to really put the foot on the acceleration pedal about helping entrepreneurs in a real, meaningful and tangible way, given the fact that so many people, as we've mentioned, are likely to be without jobs?
Yeah, what is important now, is to make sure that government become intentional about, let them put the money where their mouth is, but not just only government, even the private sector. Let's talk about the 500 million rand sponsorship support, fund that was launched recently. Talk about the NEF funding. Talk about the township and rural entrepreneurship program. The issue of access to funding, so that we can then start, funding the startups. For example, recently we were at Beshut, with the startup, making sure that we then look at the challenges that, startups are facing, the issue of access to funding, access to information, access to direct market. Because remember, we are not talking about market, we're talking about direct market. Townships and rural economies are the direct markets where people, need to take advantage of those markets. Make sure that at the end of the day, start entrepreneurship from schools, from primary schools to high schools, to universities. Look at how many students that pass their universities and colleges, but they are out there without jobs. We now need to be intentional about creating entrepreneurs that, so at the end of the day, we then push more people who are job creators than job seekers.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine there's been all kinds of discussions taking place. We know at a national level, there's been negotiators from Pretoria to Washington. I know the private sector in some instances has had a word or two. What's your sense about the extent to which those working in the township and rural economies are being included in these ongoing discussions about what, frankly, the landscape looks like after these tariffs?
Unfortunately, I'll be honest with you, we're not sitting in those tables where, the townships and the rural economies are left behind. Because at the end of the day, we're not represented in those, the negotiations and discussions. But at the end of the day, we're saying we're here. We've organized ourselves as the township and rural, organized formations that are trying by all means, to make sure that the township and the rural economy, it sustains itself. But up until government realize that there are people on the ground that are doing, serious work in terms of keeping these economies thriving. Because at the end of the day, if we're not sitting, they're making decisions on our behalf. This is why it becomes difficult, for the people in the township, to succeed, because at the end of the day, they're excluded in those discussions. For example, let's look at the envoy that goes to US and negotiate. Who's representing the township economy there, or the rural economy there? At the end of the day, we are not represented. That is why we are calling on government to start taking the township businesses very seriously and bring them on the table.
No, fair enough. Bheki Twala, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us and at least helping us introduce your voice into the discussion. Really do appreciate it. Bheki Twala is the founder of Township Economic Commission of South Africa.